Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Jeanene Wolfe, and today I'm joined by Ariel Landrum. Ariel is a narrative therapist certified in Geek therapy and co-host of the podcast Happiest Pod on Earth, which explores Disney mediums and tools for therapy and education. Today, we're going to talk about how to use geek, gaming, and pop culture passions in therapy, and I'm super excited about this. I love learning about some of the non-traditional therapeutic techniques that are being used out there, and I know that the listeners are going to love this episode. So welcome, Ariel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so to get us started off, can you give us an overview of geek gaming and pop culture and how that's used in therapy?
Absolutely. So Geek Therapy is both a nonprofit and a certification that you can actually obtain where you learn how to use a client's passions and fandoms in therapy. So our belief is that the best way to learn about ourselves and others is through the media we consume. Now, media can be TV, movies, books, but media can really be anything the client's passionate about. So if they love gardening, you might use a lot of gardening metaphors in session because it resonates with them. If they are somebody who is into sports, you might use a lot of sports metaphors because that would resonate with them. And so with Geek Therapy, it is a theory that you can add to your own theoretical lens. It is a mindset or it is an application, or it can be all three if you become certified.
Very interesting. So how did you get started in this? It sounds like maybe you founded an organization for this?
Not so
Or
much me.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, Josue Cardona, who is the founder of the nonprofit, he tells this fascinating story where he was working on his hours. This was back in 2011. So about 15 years now? Yeah. And what had happened was he saw that there was a Wii, which is a gaming platform by Nintendo, that you could at the facility he was interning at. And he asked his supervisor, "Can I play a Wii sports game with my clients?" And the supervisor was like, "Absolutely not. That is not therapy. You cannot do that." And that lit a fire under him. So he looked and did all this research. He started writing a blog, and then he started a podcast, and then it expanded into the nonprofit to the certification. And since then, there's just been more and more research coming out that talks about the fact that people actually do gain strengths and understanding through the things that they are passionate on. It's very strength-based and strength-based focused. At the time that was growing, I was getting my own hours and my own licensing, and I was working with children. So I was making little worksheets, online that would use cartoon characters, things that they might resonate with. And then I attended Comic-Con, and Josue did a presentation with some colleagues on geek therapy. And that's when I got introduced to, oh, this is a real thing, not just something that I sort of made up in my head. And I joined the nonprofit, and we now have our 5th year of TAGS, Therapeutic Applied Geek and Gaming Summit, where clinicians can get trained on various modalities by different people who are utilizing geek therapy or are certified in geek therapy. And that has been a 5 years online convention. And we regularly publish reviews of comic books in regards to how to use them in session or movies or film. We've attended different comic book conventions. We've attended different mental health conventions, both online and in person, presenting on geek therapy. And a lot of our volunteers are also doctoral students. So they're actually have dissertations, including myself, on the research, trying to really enhance this theory so that it becomes more accessible and understood.
Oh, that's just fascinating to me. I always love to hear the person being told you can't. That lights the fire under them, and then they're like, "Yeah, well, watch me."
Mm-hmm.
And it makes so much sense. Any way that we can connect with our clients, that further, grows the therapeutic alliance, the bond there that we know is the most important aspect of therapy work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I presume this is done in office as well as online or maybe in groups and things like that.
Yes, absolutely. So some of our practitioners do therapeutic role-playing games, so RPGs. That might be like Dungeons and Dragons. There are more than just Dungeons and Dragons, but that's the most commonly known one. So there are a lot of our practitioners who run group dynamic sessions where they are doing these therapeutic role-playing games and inserting maybe therapeutic themes in the games. When you think of like role playing, that has been part of therapy for eons. So adding in a more structured component with like a quote unquote dungeon master and putting in fantasy or some other components, that's an added layer. It's sort of like having some drama therapy in with the role playing. However, our practitioners have been studying how to use those elements and components in ways that help with a socialization, in ways that help with like family dynamics. I know I've run a few different sessions with siblings where their characters have to sort of like work and collaborate together. And then there are components with gaming and video games. So I myself will play video games with my clients, or I will watch them play a game. They'll share their screen because we'll be online and I'll be making comments. Sometimes the interventions are directive. So I might play Mario Kart. We do this thing called hands up, controllers down. So you put your hands up and you put your controller down. Mario Kart is a video game where you are racing other characters, both computer-generated ones or NPCs, non-playable characters, and whoever is playing with you. In this case, it's me and the client, right? And it can be very distressing to be in the lead and see your like character crash and then all these other characters pass you because it is a race. So the directive intervention of controllers down, hands up is that we are teaching distress tolerance. Can you mindfully breathe while we're like have our hands up in 5 seconds? Can you think about what you're going to do next? Are you going to go in reverse? Are you going to see what obstacles are in the way for you to try and move forward? Are you going to get a weapon ready to like attack someone who's coming behind you about to pass you, right? So that's a really good distress tolerance tool. Sometimes it is non-directive where you are having the client sort of lead. So maybe you're going to build something in Minecraft in the build and creator component. And so you are having them tell you where and what they want made. Maybe you're watching them mind and you're asking them like why they're grabbing those materials or what they are intending to do. However, the best interventions are always collaborative. So when you and the client both resonate with the media, you both understand it and enjoy it, and you can start creating themes and interactions with it. So I might have them watch a clip from like an Avengers movie, and we might talk about what's happening in the clip and see if they can apply some of the psychoeducation that's coming from like this scene into their own world. Like when it comes to, the Avengers is a team of diverse individuals. So how do you create your support network, or who are your like Avengers that you assemble when you need additional support? Or what does it look like when you have two leaders that are competing or fighting with each other? Like, how do we create conflict resolution? So all of those different ways of interacting make the sessions, I think, a little bit more dynamic. They also prevent really the clinician from engaging in like burnout, from having to actively keep thinking every session how to move something forward, and is a great way to challenge experiences of like stagnation because you're already doing something that the client resonates with or appreciates or wants to talk about.
Yeah, and that common interest is so important. Back when I used to see teens, just getting them to play a game would calm them down enough, relax them enough that they would talk to me. So I played, I don't know how many hundreds of game of Uno over the years and other games as well. And then sometimes, because I'm trying to keep the conversation going, trying really hard to lose, to not win, so that we can keep the conversation going. So this type of thing has been used a very long time. It's just called something different now. And I imagine so it's applicable to kids, teens, and adults, I would think.
Absolutely. And yeah, the themes sort of resonate. Like I said, it can work with your own theoretical lens. So mine is narrative therapy. And so when a client resonates with a story, whether it's from a book or a comic or a movie or a TV show, that totally aligns with narrative therapy. So many metaphors we can pull, so many perspective takings we can do. We can map the characters' problems and, how, like, when it showed up and what it looks like. And that gives them an idea on how to do it with themselves. For those who are play therapists, they're probably going to resonate with this a lot because there is play components involved. Individuals who are maybe more like expressive arts therapists, they're going to resonate with it because you are bringing in other media. And again, we said that media can be what the client is passionate about. So it could be like their favorite musical artist or K-pop group, right?
Okay. Yeah. And so I imagine the answer to this question is going to be marketing, but I think people probably seek you out for this and others like you for this. But for someone who has, someone's recommended you, they've come to you, how do you introduce these concepts so the client knows like this is a way that you can work with them or maybe the only way you work with clients?
Yeah, so marketing is involved, and you do like a free 15-minute consult with your client or potential client, should I say. I include in that I am certified in geek therapy, and here are some of the ways that it looks like in session. Does that sound like something that you would want incorporated or that you think would be beneficial to you? And we do have people who go to the geek therapy website specifically and email us in the contact form that they're looking for someone who is geek therapy certified. A lot of clients who are specifically neurodivergent, they really love their clinicians who are geek therapy certified, or at least have that mindset, because we're pulling from their passions and interests, their special interests. And when it comes to the actual treatment, it's in my intake form asking, what are your favorite media forms? So what do you like to engage in? How often do you engage in it? And then that goes in with like my diagnosing. So have you been pulling away from these favorite things? Hint, that could be depression. Are you afraid of telling people about your favorite things? Hint, that could be anxiety or social phobia, right? So already it's so integrated in the way that I'm conceptualizing a case. I don't separate it out as a different like treatment or something to refer specifically. It is how I am integrating the whole assessment treatment process.
So it seems to me that there's always new platforms, games, books, TV shows, movies that are coming out. How do you stay on top of that? Or do you have like a core set that you work with and maybe add some things here and there?
That's a wonderful question because that is what had put in my dissertation as a potential, not just gap, but like a barrier in becoming geek therapy certified is the fact that pop culture changes and it evolves. And what might be researched as interesting now might not be even into summer, right? So, like, very quick and rapidly changing. So, what it is shifting the mindset of I need to be expert on all these forms of medias and instead saying the client's allowed to be the expert. So if you are using a theoretical lens where you have to be the expert, this might be uncomfortable for you. If you're using a theoretical lens where it's more humanistic, client-led, then it is okay if you've never heard of this anime. You let the client talk about it. You ask questions. You ask clinical insight questions around their experience of it, which is very different than having the client teach you about their culture, which you should be doing your own education on. What we find is we say that the client's the expert, they're allowed to introduce their interests and some ways in which we can understand it. Then we encourage consultation groups so you can find out more about that specific topic. And you might be doing like a zoomed out theme. So an example would be anime One Piece has like 1,000 episodes. There's just no way that you're going to watch all of those before the next session. However, you can do a search about the different characters and ask, like, which one of these do you resonate with? Who do you identify with? Who don't you resonate with? It can be very informative when they are not drawn to a specific character and their traits and why. If you are someone who's Jungian, you might see that they're not liking this character because that manifests their shadow self, right? Or if you are a narrative therapist, you might be looking at the perspective they are drawn to more. Maybe they want to be more of a hero in their narrative and their failure story tends to look more like this character, right? The other component is that you can know a lot about the media and have a different experience than the client. What I mean by that is Star Wars has spanned generations.
Yes.
So my introduction to Star Wars is not the same as my friend Alex, who's in his 50s, and not the same as my niece, who is like 12, right?
Right.
So if I step in saying how I like Star Wars in a very specific way, that might not mean anything to either of these two individuals who learned about it through their generation's introduction. For my friend Alex, it's the OG, sort of like 3 movies, main characters. For my niece, it's lots of the animated cartoon stuff, right? So that's part of being comfortable with the client being the expert and not jumping in right away and saying, I know exactly what you're thinking and feeling, which makes sense, right? Because we don't do that about anything else in the client's world. We don't say
No.
like, oh, I understand that completely. No need to explain. So it's the same thing with pop culture, media, anything they're referencing. It is okay that you don't know.
Yeah. And that just creates such a sense of freedom anyway in your therapy work if you're open to that type of mindset, And I agree so much about this is very different than things about someone's culture. Like if you're going to work with someone of a particular culture, you need to be informed about that. Back in the 90s, when I went into grad school, we were taught have the client teach you, but we didn't have the internet and we didn't have all of that stuff back then. But that's not acceptable these days. We need to be doing the work ourselves.
Yes, and we do believe there is cultural component that you have to educate yourself on when it comes to geek culture. So what does cosplay mean? What does fan fiction mean? What is a role-playing game? Like those are things that you can look up yourself and get that common language. And you can ask very pointed clinical questions that give you details that are unique to the client's experience of those things.
Okay. So, specifically, if we look at video games in our field in particular, they're viewed as this terrible thing that's, people are going to get addicted to, that's terrible. So, if say someone's working with a teen and the parents is like, okay, really? What are you doing? You're using this game. So, I imagine, or you can tell me how you reframe this as a tool for connecting, emotional regulation, skill building, those types of things.
Yeah, video games is always the first thing that gets, like, quote, unquote, "demonized,"
Yeah.
and a part of it has to do, I think, with a generational divide. We, somewhat millennials, but, Gen X and boomers specifically, the internet is utilitarian. You don't actually live there. More Gen Z and Alpha and Zillennials, which is, like, the millennial Gen Z, like, middle gap, it is less utilitarian and you are a digital citizen. It is an actual place you have a life. So I first have to sort of describe what is happening. And so you want your child to do their homework, but they're saying, I can't. I'm in the middle of, this Valorant tournament and I can't leave it. And you're saying you can pause the game. No, you can't. That's actually in person now, live action. So you retaliate by unplugging the computer or turning off the internet. And now your child has like blown up. What you have done is, let's say they were in the middle of a soccer game. Would you go on the field and pull them off? No,
No.
that wouldn't happen. That's what you just did in that moment. You may not have realized it because your experience of the online world is something that you can turn on and off. Their experience is they have digital citizenship. They have expectations of online engagement. What you have told their friend circle is they are unreliable, they are not someone that they should utilize, and you may have created a rupture that they are going to have a repair about. And the only way they can repair it is by saying you're a bad parent, which is probably not how you want to be described to their friend group, right? So instead, you have conversations about what they're actually doing in those games. Play a game with them. When you are just hearing about it and not fully immersing yourself in your child's world, you are missing opportunities for connection and you're missing opportunities for understanding. Watch and see what they're proficient at and see if you can extract that into their daily life. So, for example, Animal Crossing became this really big game that people were playing during the pandemic. And in Animal Crossing, you have a pocket and you store items in your pocket, right? I was able to extract that in how do you organize your items? Can you do the same organization in your room for cleanup? That was translating something in a way that the child already felt proficient at doing versus going
Okay.
into the room and not knowing like what goes where and having really analysis paralysis in those experiences. So first there is reminding them that whether you like it or not, your child has an online life. Like that is an actual life that is integrated into their current one. It's not utilitarian. Learn digital citizenship and what is expected as part of engaging in an online experience. Then I say, how do you engage with them when they are online? Do you actually play the games with them? Can you describe their favorite characters and what they're doing, what the goal they're trying to accomplish in that gaming world is? And then what purpose is it serving? So if your child is in a lot of activities and they need decompression, they're gravitating towards a game that they have mastery over and is simple. That makes sense. If you had a long, busy week, you're probably gravitating towards a show that you can just mindlessly watch, right? That takes no effort. This way, the gaming probably in this world, not as much effort. If they are feeling in their world like they aren't competent, that they aren't proficient. This game is feeding that. What opportunities is their world outside of their online life creating that they are able to feel competent and proficient? If a lot of the interaction at home is all the things that they aren't doing and all the ways that they aren't contributing, that is going to feed into their psyche that I'm not good enough here, but I definitely know I'm good enough online, right? So some of those familial dynamics and expectations. And then finally, I provide the education of the addiction component. What we know is addiction involves cravings. Addiction involves a specific feedback loop. Now, can a game engage in a feedback loop that is exciting and enjoyable? Yes, because there's rewards involved. You can apply rewards outside of the game and in the home as well. However, there isn't usually a lot of craving. Usually it's a lot of avoidance. This is a great way for me to just avoid talking about the things I'm doing or feeling. But if you join me online, I'm probably more likely going to talk to you while we're doing it.
Okay. Just like if you were playing a board game with your child, just you're connecting with them in a different way. So when you're talking about the way you're informing the parents, do you do a session with them separately than the child, or one together as you get started, or even have the child learn to advocate and educate their parents around this?
Yeah, so I have the child's parents sign a consent form for me to engage in video game play and online play. So if they don't sign the consent form, then I'm probably not going to be doing that with, the client. And that's usually the session where I'm psychoeducating them on the intention and purpose of me joining that child online. There's also other things that I've considered just like ethics wise. Probably a traditional clinician isn't considering like if the game has tokens, like I might be more advanced in the game and have more tokens and can buy more things. What does that do with the therapeutic alliance if the child doesn't have as much time they can spend online? If we earn or win something in the game, what does that like sort of mean to the therapeutic alliance? So those are things that I would discuss with the parent, and depending on the age of the client, discuss with them. I think the other thing is that most parents who are seeking me out, because it is in my marketing, it is in the way that I talk, that I am going to play video games, they are somewhat curious on the ways in which I can assist in making video gameplay more, or what we're calling now screen time, more palatable and like age appropriate versus the hyper fear that's happening or fear mongering. The other component is I have a lot of parents who actually are video game designers and work in the video game field. So their conception of video gaming very different than maybe some of my parents who I have a license in Kansas, who are in Kansas and sort of the Midwest.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this is just a fascinating conversation. So you mentioned ethics. So I'm curious about with online platforms, how do you make sure it's secure? I don't, I'm have dipped my toes into this a little bit, but yeah, I don't know enough about that to be able to even conceptualize a question here.
Yeah, of course. So if we're chatting, we're going to be using the HIPAA compliant chat feature we're using. So Zoom or Google Meets. We aren't chatting inside the game. Some games I may have to add them as a friend. I let them know that at the end of gameplay, I'm going to remove them from my friends list. And they have an understanding that friend doesn't mean that we built a friendship. They understand that that means so we can actually connect, right? So again, so there's that language translation for like the parents who are like, when you're friending my child, right? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Or following them. Oh, so if the parent says that they don't want me joining the gameplay, but I can observe it, then that's the easiest, most accessible. The client has joined the Zoom or the Google Meets and they're sharing their screen and I'm watching what they're doing. Because then there's no me being online in the same platform with them. There's no really worry about like conversation or people seeing me. I do have a conversation with the client that if we have to add each other for a gaming session, like in Roblox or something, their friend list might see me listed and be curious who I am. So we talk about like what they're going to say, what they're not going to say, what confidentiality means, that they have the right to break it, but I don't. Most of the time, you can, however, put yourself on like sort of like a private mode. So that's all if you're using online platform that is a computer. If you're using a platform like Xbox, PlayStation, the Switch, each game has its own way of doing online play. Usually means that again, you have to be a friend of some kind and then remove yourself. But you and the client can go quote unquote like invisible where it doesn't show that you're online. And that's usually how we keep that like the most private. However, whether I am joining them in like a Roblox game and I have to follow them through like an online room of some kind and other people are there, other people aren't looking at the avatar and going, I wonder if that's a therapist, let me ask. Like that just
Right.
doesn't happen. And when it comes to digital citizenship, it's a great way for me to see how safe their play is. A lot of parents don't know what the interaction online looks like. So I can say, hey, there's been this one character that keeps talking to your child and it doesn't seem like it's safe. And I can educate the child on what to do, what it means to sort of
Mhm.
like block this person, how to assess like a safe interaction, cyberbullying. Those are all things that we theoretically talk to kids about, but in vivo, like
Yeah.
intervention, that's going to be the best. Children, because they're digital citizens, feel uncomfortable around the idea of blocking somebody. Again, because they're not seeing this as utilitarian. They're seeing this as a live interaction. And you don't get to block people outside of being in your online life. So why would you do that online? We have to be able to give that extra lens of, yes, it is you living online. It is a real interaction with somebody. And there are other ways to protect yourself online that we can apply some of these concepts off world, but if we're like, or offline, but if we
Mhm.
are actually online and we have these tools, why wouldn't we use them? They are tools accessible to us.
Right. Yeah, and that just makes so much sense. I mean, remember when my kids were in elementary school going to a presentation by the police department for a PTA meeting and explaining like all of these things about how predators can reach kids and
Mhm.
the kids are being safe, but they're asking innocuous questions like, what colors are your school colors? And what
Mhm.
mall do you like to go to? And, ways of gathering information and putting things together, which was shocking to me. But this is the first time I've heard someone actually taking that next step and saying, okay, instead of just trying to educate your child and they're rolling their eyes, let's talk in vivo about like this is happening
Mhm.
right now. How can
Mhm.
you handle
Mhm.
this right now?
Yeah, and to get educated back, there are a lot of times where I've had and watched clients engage with, complete strangers online in these gaming worlds because they're trading something. Like
Mm.
adopt me. I need to gather these certain things to be able to get this very unique pet. That is regular gameplay. That isn't like fear inducing and scary. So how do I
Right.
differentiate this person who I'm trading with to this person who I'm trading with, but they're actually unsafe. Their interactions seem very similar to me, and I'm not going to assume intent of harm. I'm a child.
Right. Of course. Yes. I had several of those conversations with my son over the years.
Mhm, mhm.
They also just make assumptions. I don't know if they still do, but made assumptions like, well, this person says they're a 58-year-old man and there's no threat to me. And I'm like, well,
Mhm,
they could be anybody, or they could say they're a 12-year-old boy and they could be a 58-year-old man. Like you
mhm,
don't
mhm.
really know that. You just make those assumptions, which are not safe assumptions to make.
Mhm, mhm, and again, because they are digital citizens, we need to give them the tools to navigate that online life. We can't just say, "Don't talk to anybody." That is going to invite instead your child lying to you, not sharing with you what's going on. That's gonna invite a lot of deceit, and my own personal stance is if you give a child a no, you have to tell them what the yes is. They need to know what is allowable. When you start to get into teens and people in their 20s who have been online their whole life, again, they experience it very differently. I've had plenty of teens who have 7, 8, 9 different email addresses, all that have a very specific need. I'm still
Mhm.
in my function of here's my personal one, here's my work one. And
Right.
so to be introduced to this new concept of how to even just use email, that was a great learning lesson for me. Now I have one for
Mhm.
my promotion. So that's not in my personal email junking things up. I have one for when I am trying to do marketing and ads. Again, because I'm going to get certain types of emails there that are going to be very spammy and junky versus it all being just in my personal. And now it just gets all clogged up. It's a different way of thinking that I wasn't going to ever think of if I hadn't let my client teach me that.
Yeah, we do such awful things in society, such as judging the generations that come behind us instead of being
Mhm.
curious and saying, hey, I didn't get accepted for who I was by the older generation. Why am I going to then do that to the younger one instead of having them teach you, having them share with you and connect with you that way?
Yeah, it's a really great way to step into that rapport building, have a lot of empathy and compassion. And again, a curious therapist is always a well-informed one.
Absolutely agree with that. Okay. So, final question. Well, there's one more after that. But anyway, do you see this becoming more mainstream? Like, I found you through the Facebook group because I was fascinated by that. Do you see this expanding more and more in the field of therapy and being more recognized?
I do see this expanding more and more simply because I do know that media psychology is its own branch, does exist. Play therapy is its own certification. Art therapy is its own certification. Expressive arts therapy, music therapy, those are all different certifications. And this theory and credential touches those different areas. And so we have found people, or should I say, they have found us because they saw this interest with the media and wondering how to introduce it into therapy. There are a lot of role playing games for social skills building and group dynamics. I'm seeing a lot of those for veterans, for teens, grief groups, and more of these concepts I'm also seeing in research. Like I said, we have a lot of colleagues who are doing their own dissertations, and in, a dissertation, you have to have a well-written literature review, so you're looking at all the literature that already exists, and I'm finding a lot of literature that already exists on geek culture therapies, so to speak.
Right. And I just love that, consumers are becoming so much more savvy when it comes to therapists. They know that they can seek out a therapist who provides something specific or has some attribute or quality about them that they feel like, okay, I can connect with this person.
Mhm.
They're tatted up, I'm tatted up. I don't want to see someone like me who is not gonna, although I do have tattoos, but
Yes.
he's not gonna come off as cool and maybe could be someone who's judgmental. I
Mm.
hope that that's not the case in our field, but we do know that that sometimes happens. And I just love that savvy consumers are really like looking around and seeing what's what.
And I think it's mirroring the trend of what you're highlighting, which is that clients are looking for more and more individualized therapy, more and more concepts beyond traditional talk therapy,
Mhm.
and the way that the different generations are even viewing therapy, because it was very much stigmatized. Now, not only is it a little bit less stigmatized, but now it's becoming more tailored, more specific.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a huge benefit for our field. Okay. So, Ariel, can you share if you have a favorite catchphrase or analogy that you like to use?
Yes. So at Geek Therapy, we say that the best way to learn about ourselves and the world around us is through the media we consume.
That's wonderful. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on with me today and joining me and sharing this information. I have the links that you shared. I
Mhm.
believe if they want to learn about certification, that's probably one of the links you shared, I presume.
Yes. So you can go to geektherapy.org to learn about our upcoming certification. And then if you are interested in attending our 3-day conference online, the dates are April 3rd through April 6th.
Okay, wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. So, thank you again for coming on. For all of you hardworking therapists out there, please remember our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely.